Hey guys, this is Steph, and today I want to talk about a subject that has some real potential to be awkward at the office, and that is whether or not it is appropriate to hug your coworkers in a professional environment. I can think of nothing more uncomfortable than being chest to chest with someone in a uncomfortably awkward embrace that doesn't want to be there. So I'm going to give you some tips to make sure we avoid that from ever happening. First off, should you even hug your coworkers? Is it even ever appropriate to do so? Well, as a baseline in the United States, the appropriate greeting, or if you're concluding a meeting, is really a handshake when you're in a business environment. So just as a default, if you always opt for a handshake, you won't be wrong. So what I like to do, for me personally, that is always going to be my go-to. I never initiate a hug with anyone in a professional environment just because it can be tough to know whether or not that may be well received by them. So really opt for the handshake and you won't go wrong. Now, there are, of course, some gray areas and some environments where it's more appropriate to hug someone versus other more formal type environments where that's usually not going to be the case. So that's something you want to keep in mind. For most of my career, I worked with a lot of accounting and finance folks. It was a little bit more formal. I would be on site with clients. We'd have meetings. And at the conclusion of those meetings, were I to go around and give everyone like a nice big warm hug, that would seem a bit strange and awkward and would not likely be well received by those in attendance. So you've got to really keep in mind who the audience is. If it is more of that formal type of environment or more of that formal client type relationship, in most cases, the hug is just going to be something you want to put entirely off the table. Now, if you're in a work environment that's a little bit more relaxed, a lot of times if you have more of a creative office, if it feels a little bit more like a family, that may be the type of situation where it's okay to hug your coworkers. But really, what you want to do is get a good feel for the culture before you go in and take any action on that, and calibrate how you act based on what you see. So if you see that that's the norm, that there's a lot of hugging and you've seen people hugging and everyone seems comfortable with that, if you yourself are comfortable with that and the person that you want to hug, you can tell that they would be comfortable with that based on what you've seen, then I think in that case, it's okay to go ahead, and if you are a hugger, go in for that hug. But from my perspective, you just can never go wrong with a handshake. And that's always a good default. Now, there are certain people that you are going to want to avoid hugging. So those where it's probably going to be acceptable are colleagues that you work with, where it's more of a lateral relationship, where you're collaborating, you're working together, and you spend that time together, and oftentimes that extends into a friendship that goes beyond just talking about work. So you're talking about family and things that you like to do. You're truly what you would consider friends. In that case, that's going to be someone where it's very likely going to be well received. If you were to go in and hug them, or if they were to hug you, you wouldn't think that's strange, or you wouldn't think that's awkward. However, if you have employees, anyone that reports to you, that's not going to be someone where in most cases it's going to be appropriate for you to go in and hug them, because it puts them in a potential awkward situation where they don't necessarily feel that they can turn down the hug if it's unwelcome. So because of that differential of power, the power dynamics that can be in play when it's someone who reports to someone else, that's where you really should avoid even putting someone in that type of situation where you can make them uncomfortable. So that's something to avoid at all costs. So keep it to your group of friends and those that you collaborate with, and where you won't have any power dynamics in play. So how do we make sure that we don't end up in that terrible, awkward situation where no one's quite sure whether they're going in for a handshake or a hug, and you end up in that half sideways, awkward hug shake situation? That's the worst. So Let's say you had a fantastic meeting, or you're seeing a colleague that you haven't seen for a while and you're going in for a greeting. That is not the way you want to end things off, or not the note that you want to kick things off on, not on a note of awkward uncomfortableness. So to make sure that that doesn't happen, what you need to do is clearly signal your intentions for a handshake right from the get-go. This is what I do. So if I see a colleague, someone that I'm going in to greet, if maybe they're coming at me from across the room, what you're gonna do is when you're approaching them, you'll come in at a little bit of a side angle with your hand out so they know your intention right away is that handshake. So that lets them know they can receive that communication, they receive that signal, and they can adjust accordingly. And in most cases, they'll be grateful because that just makes it all the less awkward, and they know what your intentions are, and you don't have to worry about whether you should hug or handshake. So you can just take the lead on that, but you have to do it early and you can't wait for the other person. So just get a bit of a jump on them and make sure that you're coming right in with that body language that signals, hey, I'm coming in for a handshake. What you don't want to do is have a mixed audience where you're doing a little bit of mixed messages, where some people you're hugging, some people you're shaking hands with. That can really confuse the situation, and it can also really delineate between different relationships with people. So if you're in, for example, a management meeting and some of the people in that meeting are your colleagues who are also your friends, you wouldn't want to go up and hug them and then go shake hands with the CEO. So keep it consistent so it doesn't create any additional confusion or make certain people feel that maybe their relationship is a little bit different from others. You always want to just have that fully professional greeting. So I personally am not a hugger. I am someone that is always happy to receive a hug. That's something I definitely don't mind, but I am not going to initiate a hug. It's not something I feel comfortable doing. And I also really want to make sure that I'm not putting someone else in an uncomfortable position. So I am more of a huggy than a hugger. But whether you're a hugger, a huggy, or someone that would prefer a handshake or nothing at all, that is totally your prerogative. So it's up to you to determine what you're comfortable with, and then make sure that you clearly communicate that with your body language, or if you need to, you can just say something up front so that that's clear, because no one should be in a position that they don't feel comfortable with and that they don't want to be in, especially in a professional environment. So let me know what you think. Let me know where you stand on the issue, huggy, hugger, none of the above. I am very interested to hear different people's takes on this. And thank you so much for watching.